The railways in Factorio are glorious. I love them. If you can get them to work in just the right sweet spot, then it is poetry in motion. There are a number of different ways to utilise the trains, and I'm going to try and cover the different ways that I think the trains can be arranged, but before I can get there I need to go through a few things beforehand. First up, we need to go through a general philosophy. The aim for my railway networks is for the trains to remain on the network as little time as possible. I want the trains to be in a station either in the base or at an outpost. I do not want them to be sat waiting. When a train sits waiting on the network, it blocks other trains from using that piece of track to get where they need to go. I see a lot of YouTube videos where a significant amount of management seems to go into negotiating around these stationary objects. This is specifically what I try and avoid with my factories. In practical terms, what this means is that each and every train needs a dedicated station both in the base and at the outposts. No common naming of stations. When you name several stations the same name, the train can select which station it wishes to use, regardless of whether that station has been selected by another train. So it will sit there on the network until the station clears, which is bad. If each train has a dedicated station that no other train uses, then it won't ever get blocked by another one. So that is rule 1. Correction 1. Okay, so it turns out you can name all the stations the same if you set a limit of one train at each of the stations. This is a funny old game sometimes. You think you have tried something to exhaustion and thoroughly concluded that it doesn't work, but a quick suggestion later and everything is different. Good news is that I should save a decent amount of time on my next factory. Bad news is, what a cock up, Bigfoot, you bloody idiot. Next up, the signals. I never use the three-way signal, and there is a really simple reason. I just don't understand how it works. In terms of railway networks, I understand yes and I understand no, but I don't understand maybe. I don't understand how to use that or how to manipulate it. It is just a complete mystery to me. But the thing is, I haven't ever had cause to find out how to use it either. The two-way signal has always worked just fine. I've never had the need to investigate how the three signal works. Or maybe I build railway networks in such a way that they aren't necessary. Which leads me on to my next point. Railway lines which cross, but which do not allow complete freedom for the trains to travel wherever they like, are bad. If your trains have to travel further in order to navigate around an obstacle you have created for it, then it spends more time on the network and increases the potential for it to get in the way of another train. In any places where your railway networks intersect, they need to be constructed in a way that allows for trains to go in any direction they like, even back on themselves. In practical terms, this means roundabouts and loops, lots of them, as many as possible. That is the basic general philosophy sorted. Before we can get to the railway networks themselves, we also need to go through the stations, the loading and unloading points. The obvious goal is to unload and load the train as quickly as possible, but for a lot of the time that isn't really possible because for the loading part we are going to be limited by how much ore is being mined. So the loading of the train is going to take longer. The unloading of the train will only be limited if the ore it is unloading is already full in the base, which means the factory is full of ore, and that is a good problem. What this means is that I want to engineer the unloading portion of the cycle in the base for maximum throughput, but that the design of the loading portion at the outpost is less critical. The fastest way to move items out of a box, like the storage cart on a train, is to use a stack inserter to move the material into another box. This will move a lot more material than a fast inserter would. So if you look at the unloading station in my base, you will notice that each of the storage carts on the train has 4 boxes either side that the stack inserters can unload into. From there I use a fast inserter to load the material onto the conveyors. You could technically fit 6 boxes either side of the train, and this would increase efficiency. It would unload quicker, but whenever I have tried it, it has always looked ugly. The way I have it, with the conveyors running down the middle, looks elegant to me. And if I lose a little efficiency in this part of the factory, then the way to make up for that is to just add more trains. More trains equals more awesome in my book. So that is what I'm going to do. You may also notice that these aren't just steel chests, but storage chests for the logistic network. I use these as my trash bin. Anytime I pick up ore I don't want, this is where the robot network brings it. As I stated, the loading portion is less critical, but I'm still going to use the same principle with the stack inserters and the boxes. In the time it takes for the train to travel from here to the base, unload and travel back again, we want whatever ore that mines are producing to charge up in these boxes. Then when the train arrives, at least we have given it the best chance of loading as quickly as the mining output allows. We only technically need enough storage in the boxes to match the capacity of the train, but again 4 boxes looks elegant, so that is what I do. So these are the 2 basic stations I use. 8 boxes for the unloading in the base, and 4 boxes for the loading at the outpost. If you are just starting to build your factory, then the question you may ask yourself is, how many trains will I need? It can be annoying if you have built your factory for a set amount of trains, only to find out that the quantity that you have allowed for is not sufficient for the factory capacity you have constructed, i.e. there's a bottleneck on the train network. The maths I use is to assume an average flow rate of 20 ore per second per train storage cart. This is a pretty important number, so let me explain. If we take a look at my Vanilla 2 time lapse, we can see that I have 8 blocks of copper, each of which needs to be fed with 45 ore per second, so 360 ore per second in total. If we use the 20 ore per second average, 360 divided by 20 is 18 storage carts. That is the amount of storage carts I need to feed the amount of ore required. In this factory I have opted for a 5-block train throughout, a locomotive front and back and 3 storage carts in the middle, so 18 storage carts required, divided by 3 storage carts per train, and I require 6 trains to feed the 8 blocks of copper, and bingo, this is what I have built. I have tried a factory with an average of 30 ore per second per storage cart, and it was never able to quite achieve the required throughput. With everything upgraded, it just couldn't get there. If you are using a map specifically designed for trains, you may even want to opt for a lower number, like 15 or even 12. I can't say I have rigorously tested these numbers. With larger train networks, it might also bottleneck at 20, I can't say for sure. But as a starting point, 20 seems to perform pretty well. It hasn't bottlenecked for me yet, so that is what I'm going to aim for. Okay, with all that out of the way, we can get into the nitty-gritty. The first, most basic simple way to arrange a rail network is with a there and back again design. At its most basic, we only need a single railway line, and the train will travel in both directions along the same track. This can only be used with a single train. If you try with multiple trains, then there is nothing stopping them from running into each other. There are no signals available for this design because they dictate a flow of travel. We can only have one train on the network, so it can go wherever it likes, whenever it likes. Signals are of no use. Signals only work when you're trying to define a direction of travel on a network, or at least as far as I'm aware. So if you've got trains travelling both directions on a single line, you can't use signals on that particular portion of the track. Correction 2. I really hope this isn't the start of a pattern. Anyway, another something that I thought I had thoroughly investigated, only to discover that no, I either didn't try hard enough, or something has changed in the game between when I tried and now. Most likely the first one. So if you place a signal either side of the track, then they somehow link together and form a bi-directional set of signals, and this allows the train to travel both ways along the same track. It's pretty neat actually. If only I hadn't made a whole video proclaiming some kind of knowledge over this damn game. In terms of practical use for this type of network, I can only really find 2. Firstly, if your factory is very basic and you just want to move one particular kind of material, or maybe even have a dedicated network for each ore, then this type of network can be of some use. I haven't ever tried this, I'm not sure it would work very well, but if you wanted to, you could. The second practical use would be if you were building in a very tight ribbon world, i.e. a ribbon world so tight that you weren't able to fit a loop in the space available. If you can fit a loop into your railway network so that you can run 2 railway lines to your destination, so each direction of travel has a dedicated railway line, then the efficiency of the network is massively increased. Which leads me on to the second kind of network. The second kind of network is what I would call the loop design. By designing the base so that railway network is a series of interconnected loops, we can get away with a single track, but also keep that single track running a single direction. Yes, trains will end up travelling a lot further than they might need to in order to navigate around the loops, but if throughput of the material isn't critical, then a bit extra time spent on the network isn't the end of the world. The railway line can go in either a clockwise or anti-clockwise, counterclockwise direction. There aren't any limits, and as long as where the subloops join, the train direction is consistent, they don't necessarily all have to be the same counterclockwise or clockwise direction, anti-clockwise, whichever way you want to say it. In fact, you might even find you have to alternate the direction of the loops for where they join together in order to make it work. This is the kind of railway network I use in Angel and Bob, because with those mods it isn't critical how quickly ore gets delivered. In Angel and Bob, the ore purification process is really fiddly and takes a long time to process a full train's worth of material. In the time it takes for a train to leave the base and return with a full cargo, the main base has probably only processed 10% of the previous load, so the trains end up sitting idle in their main base stations for significant lengths of time. What this means is that the railway network can be designed, if we wish, to be less efficient with how long the trains spend on the network. They are much less likely to get in each other's way. For the signals, we first want to separate off the stations from the network, so one either side of the train station. This just means the network has a dedicated segment for each station and stops the network from jamming. For the rest of the network, it really doesn't matter too much. We want a signal at any point where the railway splits or joins, and I tend to use two signals rather than one on the junction just to keep the segments clear of confusion, but other than that the signals can just be placed at regular intervals around the network. The final kind of railway network is really the full Monty of railway networks. If the train network is critical, i.e. the main limiting factor of your factory is in how much material can be delivered at any one time, then you need to use this one. If you are expecting to have upwards of 15 to 20 locomotives whiz around your factory and not getting in the way of each other, then you need to use this one. It is basically the same as the previous loop design, except now we have two lines running in tandem across the whole factory. Anytime these two lines meet another two lines, we need a roundabout. Trains must be able to turn around quickly. We need them to spend as little time on the network as possible. So anytime there is enough space, we need to give them the option to do so. If you build the train lines like I do, with the tracks tight up against each other, then the direction of travel is dictated by the fact that you can't get the signals between the tracks. So with the signals on the outside, the direction of travel is forced on us. The best place for the stations is to squeeze them between the two lines. That way any trains not stopping at these stations can travel around without disturbance. It also allows a decent roundabout to be formed around the stations that allows trains to arrive and depart from and to any direction. For the signals, once again we start with the stations and put one either side of each train station. For the roundabouts, they need to be one segment all on their own, so two signals at each entrance or exit. Don't get greedy. I have tried many times to place these signals inside the roundabout, but it has never worked. At some point the trains just get in each other's way. With the signals set up like this, I haven't ever had a problem. With the stations and roundabout segments sorted, it is now just a case of splitting up the network into regular segments. How regular is up to you, and how big the factory is that you are constructing. For practical uses, no. Forget practical uses. This is the network you should use unless there is something specific about your factory that means that this type of design isn't necessary, for throughput reasons or for factory size reasons. In most examples, this is the network to go for. Okay, so those are the railway networks as I understand them. I hope this has been of some help. Till next time.